Denver's first pale light spread across the city as Nathan Cross stood in his stripped-down apartment, the echo of emptiness surrounding him like a verdict. The only things left were a duffel bag by the door and his 7-year-old daughter asleep on an air mattress, unaware that this was the morning her father planned to vanish without saying goodbye. He bent down to check her blanket when a sharp knock cut through the silence. Too early, too deliberate to be a mistake. Nathan's pulse kicked hard. No one should have known he was still here. No one should have cared. A voice followed, steady but strained. "Nathan, please open the door. I need to speak with you." He knew that voice. Every fired employee in the company did. Eleanor Ashford, CEO of Westbrook Development, the woman whose signature had ended his career, was now standing on the other side of his failing apartment. Nathan stared at the door, stunned. Why would the most powerful woman in the city track down the man she'd allowed to be ruined? And why now, on the very morning he was trying to disappear? What she's about to tell him will change everything. Stay with this story. And make sure to like and subscribe to Canada's Heartfelt Tales for more life-changing narratives. The knock came again, harder this time, as if the world outside refused to let Nathan slip away quietly. Sophie stirred on the air mattress, and Nathan instinctively stepped in front of her, shoulders tense. He wasn't ready for another accusation, another stranger looking at him like the man from the headlines. He opened the door only halfway, keeping his body angled protectively. Eleanor Ashford stood in the hallway, her blouse still crisp despite the early hour, her expression strangely unguarded. For a woman whose presence usually dominated boardrooms, she looked smaller here in the dim corridor of a rundown apartment building. She glanced past him, noticing the bare walls, the missing furniture, the quiet ache of a life dismantled piece by piece. "Nathan," she said softly, "I need to talk with you." He didn't move. "I don't work for you anymore." "I know," she replied. "That's why I'm here." Something in her voice, steady yet shaken, forced him to let her inside. She stepped over the threshold carefully, as though afraid to break whatever thin stability he had left. Sophie watched from behind him, rubbing her eyes, studying the elegant stranger with the wary curiosity of a child who has learned that adults can hurt without ever raising their voices. Nathan signaled her gently to rest in the corner, then turned back to Eleanor. "Say what you need to say." The CEO took a slow breath, grounding herself in a truth she'd rehearsed all night. "You didn't fail the Riverside project. You didn't fabricate numbers. You didn't mislead anyone. You were silenced. And you were used." Nathan felt a flash of heat rise in his chest, not anger, but something sharper, recognition of a truth he had endured alone. "You knew this 6 months ago." "I didn't," she said quickly. "That's the problem. I trusted the wrong people. I believed the wrong reports. And while I was doing that, 2 of my executives were burying your warnings and turning you into the perfect shield for their fraud." Nathan folded his arms across his chest, not to challenge her, but to keep his voice steady. "So now you suddenly want to fix it?" "I do," she said, meeting his eyes with an honesty that surprised him. "But not with money. Not with another document full of legal phrases. I want to restore what should never have been taken from you." Before he could respond, a small voice drifted from behind him. "Daddy, who is she?" Eleanor looked at Sophie gently. "Someone who should have listened to your father." Those words cut deeper than any apology. Nathan told Sophie to get dressed and wait by the bag. They had been leaving in minutes anyway. But when she moved away, he turned back to Eleanor, the heaviness of months pressing between them. "You think you can walk in here and erase what happened? The jobs I begged for. The looks people gave me. The nights my daughter cried because she thought she did something wrong." "No," Eleanor said. "But I can show you who did do something wrong. And I can make sure they can't hurt anyone again." There was a tremor of conviction in her voice. This wasn't PR damage control. This was personal. She reached into her coat and pulled out a folder. Inside were printouts, emails he'd written, warnings he'd issued, spreadsheets with red flags he had circled. It was evidence. Evidence he never knew had survived. I'm conducting a full investigation, she said. External. Independent. And I want you to be there when the truth comes out. Nathan said nothing. His silence was not resistance. It was the fragile process of believing he might finally be seen. Eleanor continued. I'm not asking you to come back. I'm asking you not to disappear. Sophie stood near the door now, holding her elephant, waiting for her father to decide whether their lives would be defined by fleeing or fighting. Nathan closed his eyes for a long moment, then opened them with a calm that felt unfamiliar. If we do this, we do it on my terms. Eleanor nodded. Whatever terms you need. That was how, 2 days later, Nathan found himself in a conference room on the 32nd floor of Westbrook Development, a building he had once entered with pride, then shame, and now with something else entirely. Purpose. The investigative team sat across the table, folders open, evidence displayed in the clarity of morning light. Eleanor entered last, her posture straight, her face carved with resolve. When the door shut behind her, the room settled into a tense quiet. On the far end sat Victor Hale, the former vice president of development, a man who had once praised Nathan publicly and undermined him privately with equal ease. Beside him was Marla Kent, finance director, whose smile at company events never reached her eyes. Victor leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. So this is the circus you're running now, Eleanor? She didn't flinch. This is accountability. Nathan felt something shift inside him. A loosening of the weight he'd been carrying, a reclaiming of the space that had been stolen. He didn't sit passively. He leaned forward, voice steady, and began walking the investigators through every inconsistency he had flagged. His words were measured, but there was a power in them that had almost been extinguished. Victor smirked. You really think they'll believe your little stories? You're the one who signed off on everything. And you're the one who altered the numbers, Nathan replied. The metadata proves it. That wiped the smirk off Victor's face. Marla shifted in her seat, flipping through documents as though searching for an exit that didn't exist. When the investigators presented a timeline of her secret late-night spreadsheet revisions, changes she had blamed on Nathan, her composure cracked. You expect me to take fall for him, she snapped. He didn't know half of what was going on. Eleanor's voice sharpened. He knew enough to raise concerns you buried. The unraveling was swift. By noon, the investigators had enough evidence to conclude that Victor and Marla had orchestrated the fraudulent numbers, concealed cost overruns, and fed false information to both city officials and the CEO. The decision was final. Both would face termination, legal action, and referral to state authorities. Victor tried once more to salvage his image, standing abruptly. You're destroying the company, Eleanor. All because you feel guilty about some middle manager who couldn't keep up. Nathan stood too, his tone calm but firm. I kept up. I told the truth. You're the one who couldn't. For a moment, Victor's face twisted with rage, pure, unmasked frustration from a man who had climbed his whole life by stepping on those who trusted him. But this time, there was no one left beneath him to cushion his fall. Security escorted him out. The door closed with a sound that felt like a chapter ending. Marla didn't shout. She didn't protest. She simply lowered her eyes as the investigators gathered their materials. She knew what was coming. By the end of the week, both were indicted on charges of fraud, falsifying financial documents, and obstruction. Their assets were frozen. Their reputations collapsed faster than the scaffolding of the project they had corrupted. For the first time in months, Nathan breathed freely. Not because the fight was over, but because the truth was no longer buried. Eleanor approached him later that afternoon. Her voice quieter than he had ever heard it. Nathan, I can't undo the suffering. But I want to build something better, with you guiding it. She offered him a position leading a new ethics division, independent from corporate pressure, with the authority to stop abuses before they reached the public. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked through the glass toward the city that had witnessed his collapse. It looked different now. Not because Denver had changed, but because he had. When he finally spoke, it was simple. Yes, but not because I trust the company. Because I want my daughter to grow up knowing that the truth matters. Eleanor nodded, accepting the terms. And somewhere far away, in an empty office being cleared out by court order, Victor Hale realized the cost of underestimating the man he tried to bury. He didn't just lose his job. He lost the future he had stolen from others. And the city that once shrugged at corruption now watched him fall without sympathy. In the weeks that followed, Nathan found himself walking through the same streets that once felt hostile, only now they no longer carried the shadow of what had been done to him. Meetings filled his days, but not the kind that drained him. These were conversations where his voice mattered, where decisions shifted because he spoke. Sophie noticed it first. One evening, as she worked on her homework in his new office, she looked up and said, "Dad, you stand different now." He didn't correct her. She was right. Something inside him had settled, not because the past had vanished, but because he finally understood that truth didn't need to shout to win. It only needed space to breathe. Eleanor stopped by occasionally, offering updates or simply sharing the quiet relief of knowing the company was learning to rebuild from honesty instead of fear. Their exchanges weren't grand gestures, just small acknowledgments that change was possible when someone chose to start it. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Nathan watched its reflection flicker across the building's glass. For the first time in a long while, the future didn't feel heavy. Felt open. And the man who once prepared to leave everything behind realized he had become the reason another story wouldn't break the way his almost did. If this journey touched you, please like the video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and help Canada's Heartfelt Tales grow by subscribing.